Hi, this is Arthur Hill, Senior Technical Analyst with StockCharts.com. This instructional video will show you some tips and tricks for your annotations. Here are the topics and the timeline for today. We're going to start you off with hotkeys and how to improve efficiency. Then we'll show you how easy it is to create a parallel trend line to draw price channels. We'll then show you how to draw straight lines and create perfect squares. We'll show you how to create support and resistance zones, and we'll show you how to mark a head and shoulders pattern using the parabola. And finally, we'll show you how to pin a permanent note to your sharp chart. Using hotkeys to improve efficiency. Let's start by showing you where you can find information on the hotkeys. On the ChartNotes workbench at the bottom, you can see the question mark button, and that is for ChartNotes help. And if you click on that, you're going to get a real nice list of hotkey combinations. You have the action icons at the top, the global hotkeys, and the annotation specific hotkeys. Now I'm working on a Mac, so you can see the command key is used for a lot of combinations. If you're working on Windows, it will be the control key, CTRL. The first thing I want to show you is how to activate the select tool using a hotkey. So you can see that the Fibonacci retracements tool is active because that button is shaded. If I want to activate the select tool up at the top, I will press the shift key and hold it down. And you can see that the select tool is now grayed out, that button is, so it is active. And that means I can move to any of the annotations, click on them, and adjust them as I need to. Simply release the shift key and you will revert back to the prior active annotation. The Fibonacci retracement is the active annotation because it's got the yellow handles, and I can move through these annotations by pressing the tab key on the keyboard. So if I press it, you can see that I'm going to move to the green trend line. It has yellow handles now. Press it again and I'm going to move to the rectangle, and press it again, I'm going to move the parabola. And once you've activated those annotations, you can adjust them as you see fit. Creating parallel trend lines for price channels. Chartists can quickly and easily create a parallel trend line by selecting a trend line. You can see this blue trend line is active, holding the control key down and pressing the D key, and that will create a parallel trend line. Then I can click and drag that trend line to where I want it to be. You can also create a parallel trend line by activating the trend line, holding the control key down, and then clicking that trend line and dragging. You can do the same thing with a horizontal trend line. Select it and then Control D to duplicate it, or select it, Control, click and drag, and then you can move it to make it parallel and above or below. Drawing perfectly straight lines and perfect squares. If we have a trend line on the chart and we decide we want to make that trend line straight and we want to make it into a perfectly horizontal line, you hold the control key down, click the yellow handle and drag, and that will make a perfectly straight line. Again, hold down the control key, click and drag, and then you can adjust that as you like once it's activated. If you want to draw a perfectly straight line from the start, then select the trend line button, go to where you want to draw, click, hold down that control key, and drag to draw a perfectly straight line. If we have a rectangle on the chart and we want to turn that into a perfect square, we'll select the rectangle, hold down the shift key, and then drag one of the yellow handles. And you can see you've got a perfect square, and then you can move that square as you like. You can do the same thing with an ellipse. If you want to create a perfect circle, grab one of those yellow handles, but first hold down the shift key and then drag that yellow handle, and you can see you get a perfect circle. How to create support and resistance zones using the box annotation and opacity. First, I need to draw a rectangle on the chart, so I will click the rectangle button to select that annotation, click and drag to draw, and then adjust it as I need it. So you can see it's currently solid, and that's because the fill is filled. I can make that an outline if I want by clicking the unfill, and I can fill it back to make it solid. Now, in order to make this a zone that we want to see, we need to adjust the opacity. And on the top left, you can see the colors. And if you click that little triangle, there's a drop-down menu. And at the bottom right, you have the opacity slider. And I can slide this to the left to adjust the opacity and make it more transparent. Now, with all of these annotations, pretty much, you can duplicate them by holding the Control key down and pressing the D key. And you can also duplicate the annotations by selecting them, holding down the Control key, clicking and dragging the annotation. If I want to make a support zone green, then I can adjust the color here by choosing one of the recently used, and I can also move this above to make it a resistance zone. Marking head and shoulders patterns using the parabola. Chartists that want to mark a head and shoulders pattern on the chart can use the parabola. It's under the line tools. It's got the little smiley. So you will click that button to activate it. You can either click and drag to draw, or you can mark 3 points by clicking 1, 2, 3. And once that annotation is active, you select, activate it. You can, of course, duplicate it by doing a Control, click and drag, and you can also adjust it using the yellow handles. So here I've marked an inverse head and shoulders, and as we saw before, we can also mark a resistance zone that would of course be the neckline of this pattern. How to pin a permanent note to your sharp chart. If you keep a public chart list, or you want to share your charts and you want to put a permanent note on your chart, in other words, one that stays in its place and doesn't move, you can pin that note. And so what I'm going to do is select the call out note, and I will click to activate that on the chart, enter my text, and then place it where I want it to stay, maybe at the top left. And then there's the pin button right above at the top left. And if I click that button, you can see now it's shaded blue, and that means it is activated. So that means this annotation will stay where it is on that chart at all times up at the top left. And that concludes this instructional video for ChartNotes. Be sure to check out our other instructional videos, and thanks for watching.